Hey everyone, it's the Hey Poopy Podcast. What that booty do from poop to pleasure to health. Hosted by me, Dave.
And me, Ellen, two curious people removing the stigma from your stinker. And why are we doing this? Because we love laughing and learning about the butts and helping them to be the best they can be. And on this week's episode, we have Lina Zeldovich, who wrote this incredible book called The Other Dark Matter, all about what we can do with our poo to make it healthier for people, make it compostable, and everything else.
Yes, she really tapped into how much of a natural resource poop really is. And this book kind of covers that whole thing. And you can hear amazing little quips like this.
Your agent makes you rewrite your book proposal about 15 times. Then you finally write the book. It's another year and a half, then edits. Anyway, I've been with that book for 3 or 4 years, and it's finally coming out last November. And suddenly, a week before that release, I have this massive anxiety, what the fuck was I thinking writing a book on poo? Who gonna read it? Mind you, there's 7 billion people on this planet, and all of them poo.
True.
Let's hope.
But all these other topics, right? So it comes out, and for 6 weeks, #1 bestseller on Amazon in the environmental engineering category. Now, environmental engineering and poo, you wouldn't think that they are related, but they are, because all this shit has to go somewhere in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are really bad places for it to go, and there are better places for it to go, and there are really good places for it to go. Anyway, bestseller, it's pretty damn impressive, attributed to the fact that every person on this planet shits.
Yes, she was a fantastic guest, a wealth of information, and she's the front lines of where this whole poop renaissance is going.
Completely. She was a great guest and even talks about things you can do with your poo to help people. And we were so happy to have another fabulous author who was on the bestsellers list for 6 weeks on Amazon, thanks to writing poop.
That book is killing it.
Yeah.
And we'll have all our information, all our info in the show notes. And speaking of info, if you'd like to know more about me and Ellen, you can do us a favor, go to heypoopypodcast.com, and you can find out all the information about this show, merchandise, whatever, resources about everything we do.
Yes, from merch to supporting us on Patreon and more.
Yes, yes, yes.
And now on to the shit show.
Hey Poopy, how you doing? Hey Poopy, how you doing?
I'm just, trying to find a place with like-minded people to talk about like-minded things about me, about poop and stuff.
Hey Poopy, how you doing? Hey Poopy, how you doing?
Oh man, what's this right here? Is this a podcast about poop?
Hello, everyone. Welcome back on this glorious dump day.
Hey, everybody. It's the Hey Poopy Podcast with
Dave
and Ellen, and this is episode 172, but it'll always be number 2 to us. I cannot believe 172. Wow, Dave.
That's a lot of episodes.
We should pat ourselves on the back, but we have a really amazing guest today, the author of The Other Dark Matter, Lina Zeldovich.
Yes, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here.
Of course. And we learned about your book, I think it was through one of our other guests, and I had to buy it. And I actually bought it twice. I bought a hard copy and I listened to it on Audible. So
Cool.
I did
Fully
it all.
covered, audio and visual.
Yeah. Yes. But Lina, before we go into who you are and what you do, we'd like to know, how have you been pooping recently?
Have I been pooping recently? I have. How is a whole other question. Do I really want to get into details?
Well,
You don't have to, but Dave and I will.
Yeah, I mean, it's more like, have you been regular? Have you not been regular? That kind of thing. You don't have to get necessarily into the super detailed gritty ditty.
And you can give us Bristol stool chart numbers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I actually do talk about it in the book. I cover pretty much all of those in the Bristol new poop chart, starting from those that are really hard and those that you can barely get to your toilet. I think in part because I travel a lot. When I travel a lot, I eat different food, and I am an adventurous eater. I'll eat pretty much anything, and sometimes it doesn't always come out the other end nicely. So
This is very true.
I hope that wasn't too much info.
No,
Oh, no,
never.
not at all.
Not on this show.
So like you're basically saying lately you've been kind of going from 1 to 6,
Yeah.
just all over. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I might have been even off the chart a few times.
I feel like we've all been there a couple times.
And did you poop today, Lina?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Once, twice? Are you a regular morning person?
I am a morning person. When it comes to pooping, I'm a morning person. When it comes to writing, I'm very much a night owl. But yeah, definitely one of the first things right after coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the usual for a lot of guests. Coffee,
Yes,
then
totally.
right to the bathroom. So
Yeah, coffee bathroom.
okay,
Yeah. It opens up the bowels.
nice.
What about you, Dave?
I have gone twice today, so
Oh.
nothing particularly spectacular. Like a 4.5, and then like a 5 later. So I'm pretty regular. I'm sure I'll go to the bathroom again at some point tonight. It's still a lot of day left, I guess. So we'll see. But yeah, it'll be between 2 and 3 times a day.
You have a new job where you go into an office. Have you pooped
Yes.
there?
I have not.
Whoa.
It's still new, so I mean, I'll give it some chance. The bathroom facilities are really nice.
Ooh.
The stalls are like pretty, like you can't really see what's going on inside, which is nice, but they're really narrow, which I don't like. But yeah, I mean, I've used the pisser. That's been pretty nice. But no, I haven't. I mean, I don't go in that often, but when I do, I just try to make sure that like I don't have to go because I'd rather just wait till I get home. But if I do, I'll let you know. I'll let you know if I christen the new office building.
Yeah, I'm curious because you haven't pooped that much out of your house in the past couple of years,
No.
except for on vacation and once in your pants.
Pretty
But,
much. So this will be.
I'm curious about the office.
Yeah.
The office journey.
It's really nice in there. So I feel a little more comfortable than some other offices I've worked in before. Some have been a lot like shittier. But Ellen, I'm sure you have something.
I don't have something incredibly epic. I've been very stressed out recently, which my body has, I think, equated the stress into a Bristol 5. I'm not as Bristol 4 as I'd like to be. I would like to describe it as there's a lot more toilet paper being used when I have to wipe. Even I have sprayed the bidet and still I'm like, oh, it's a little sticky down there. And I have been pooping a lot. Like where I'm like, I don't even think I've been eating that much food. Where is it all coming from? But Dave and I were at the Mermaid Parade in Coney Island over the weekend on Saturday, and I surprisingly didn't poop at all that day.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, kind of like nervous because if any of you have been to Coney Island, the bathrooms are few and far between and the lines are very, very long. And standing there waiting to be in the parade and walk the parade is a couple hours. Like the minute we arrived on the train, went straight to pee. The minute the parade was done, I saw a bathroom, also went straight to pee, but no poop came out. And there was a moment where I was like, oh, am I going to be constipated? Did I start an evil cycle? And the next day I ate this delicious Ethiopian Dominican food. And I had a little bit of everything. My friend Caroline, who's been on the show too, ordered the food. It was just flavor after flavor of plantains and collard greens and beets. And I have been shitting so well after that meal.
Oh, perfect.
So if you're ever constipated or need a little bowel pick-me-up, I suggest some Ethiopian Dominican beans, lentils. I just went to town. So yes, my body has been making a plethora of poo.
Okay. That sounds good. I'm glad it's working out. That's better than not taking shit. So that's always a nice thing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see that we all checked in now.
Yes.
Now's the fun part where we get to find out more about our esteemed guest.
Yes. Lina, tell us more of what you do besides your poo.
I write a lot. I don't think these two things are connected, but yeah, I write a lot. And well, other than the fact that I wrote the whole book on poo, which it was interesting. I spent probably like 3 or 4 years altogether when you're writing it. First you write a book proposal, then you find an agent, then your agent makes you rewrite your book proposal about 15 times, then hopefully it sells. Then you finally write the book. It's another like year and a half, then edits and all that stuff. Anyway, I've been with that book for 3 or 4 years, and it's finally coming out last November. And suddenly, like a week before that release date, I have this massive anxiety, like, what the fuck was I thinking writing a book on poo? Who gonna read it? Mind you, there's 7 billion people on this planet, and all of them poo.
True.
Let's hope.
Really. But I have this intense moment of anxiety. Who's going to read? Who's going to? I mean, like all these other topics, right? So it comes out, and for 6 weeks, it's sitting as a #1 bestseller on Amazon in the environmental engineering category. Now, environmental engineering and poo, you wouldn't think that they are related, but they are, because all this shit has to go somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are really bad places for it to go, and there are better places for it to go, and there are really good places for it to go. So anyway, 6 weeks as a #1 bestseller, it's pretty damn impressive.
That's incredible.
And I attribute it to the fact that every person on this planet shits.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It is very true. But even from your book, you seem to have grown up with poo.
Yeah, I've definitely grown up with poo, up close and personal, probably more than most other people. So yeah, there's a story to that. So I kind of had a somewhat unconventional upbringing, I guess, compared to most people. I was born and raised in the former Soviet Union, when it was still the Soviet Union, with all the good, bad, and the ugly. And so my grandfather I grew up on my grandfather's farm, and the way he farmed, it was what today we would call organic farming. So very few synthetic fertilizers, did a lot of things by hand. And one of the things he did every fall, he would open up our septic tank where all of the shit from like we in a house generated went through the entire year. He would open up the tank and would put on the special coveralls and heavy duty boots and everything, and would take out 2 big buckets and start ladling it out and putting it on our farm. A little bit onto the patches, but most of it went into compost pits, which he, together with all the other biomass that you have on the farm at the end of the year, and then some kitchen scraps and everything. And he would put it all together, cover the pits, and let them sit for 3 years, 3 seasons. And then he would open it up in like the 3rd spring, and then he would open it up. All the shit was gone, and all we had in there was this incredibly rich black dirt, and it smelled so good. It did not smell like sewage whatsoever.
Wow.
It had that forest smell, and you just wanted to dig your hands into it and play with it and put it onto the patches and plant all this tomatoes and cucumbers and strawberries on it, because all that stuff used to grow so well.
Wow.
And so I never developed any aversion to poo. I thought that this was the circle of life. And it is actually the circle of life.
It
was
is.
the circle of life before we build our industrialized wastewater treatment system. So anyway, so there I am growing up thinking that this is what everybody does. Because otherwise, how would they grow food? My grandfather used to say, you have to feed the earth the way you feed people. So you have to feed the earth. So I'm sure all the other people are feeding the earth with their shit the same way we do. So shit is a good thing. It stinks, but it grows food. Then I grow up and I realize that, no, the world doesn't do that. Damn unique. It was pretty much it was a really big shocker to realize that the world is really not as ideal as you think it is.
Yeah. Well, especially if you grew up that way, too. You're used to a certain way of living, and then I'm sure you were going, and when you got older, you're kind of, what the fuck? Why does everybody else do this?
Exactly. Like, why are you flushing it down the drain and you don't even know where it goes? All this rich stuff, you don't know where it goes and what happens with it? Yeah, I wanted to know what happens with it.
But it seems like about 150 years ago, with this industrial age, we discovered that poop had too much bacteria, which made other people sick, and still to this day makes other people sick when it's not treated properly. But before that, yes, there were tons of farms for hundreds and hundreds of centuries, and where we would recycle our poo to make it into dirt and soil, and there's nutrients in it. And so what your grandfather was doing was smart, because he was taking, as your book almost described, the other dark matter is gold. It has gold in it, literally and figuratively, and that we need to go back to these old ways in a healthy and smart and futuristic way to use this poo.
Yeah. So exactly. What's interesting, when I was doing this research for the book, I found out things that I didn't know. So like ancient societies, particularly in places where soil wasn't rich, it's kind of like sandy or nutrient poor or just not very good soil. Societies in these places got incredibly thrifty and smart about using their own excrement. And in particular, the two societies I talk a lot in the book about are in ancient China and Japan. So Japan is a tiny island. It really does not have a lot of arable land. It didn't have it back then. They also didn't have a lot of grass, and so they didn't have a lot of cattle. And so basically, like, the only fertilizer that they could have was the one that they produced themselves. And they had a really interesting word for it called shimagoye, and it meant fertilizer from the bottom of a person. So because there was so few it was literally measured in gold. It was paid for in gold, or it was exchanged in the form of rice for poo. And that there was a really interesting excrement economies that revolved around all of that. So in our society, we pay in the form of taxes to remove our poo from our homes and exterminate it somehow. In those societies, farmers paid to get it so they could grow food with it. So they would have food to eat, and then they could sell it back to the cities that produce that poo. And there's this really very complex forms of gathering them in the cities. Cities were like broken into regions, and there were services that would like walk through the regions of like their own regions and gather the poo from there. And then they would take it to the wharfs and load it up into canoes and gondolas and cover it with straw so that it wouldn't stink too much, and sail it off to the countryside. That was really impressive. Like, some of the cities in China were huge. They had like 3 million people, 6 million people. And nonetheless, the services functioned so well that the cities were reasonably clean and farmers had all the poo they wanted.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, here's another really interesting thing that I've learned. So not all poo was created equal. So human manure sold to the highest bidder. Animal, not so much. But the most expensive type of poo was the one that came from the rich and affluent parts of the city, because these people were supposedly have better diets and they had more diverse assemblage of nutrients. And so...
Do you think that was true, though? I would think that, like, I mean, at least in modern society, there are wealthy people eating crazier foods that maybe their poo isn't as nutrient rich as somebody who's maybe having a more simple diet of like vegetables, rices, and beans. I'm curious. I mean, like, it just seems like a very funny hierarchy of like, you're rich, so your poo is worth more.
Well, they might also have access to like other types of food that if someone who's like doesn't have as much, just kind of eating one staple diet, maybe they're bringing in other things that necessarily aren't available to people that are a little bit without, I guess I should say. So, but it is fascinating. Like, we have to go up in the hills or to the ivory towers to get like the good stuff. That is fascinating, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell, but that's what they thought, and that's how they operated. It's, you know, I mean, it takes a while to like wrap your mind around all these very different forms of thinking.
What was
really?
Yeah. Like, so when I know you were talking earlier, you're kind of like going back, like, why did I write this book? Who's gonna read it? Which, I mean, thank you for writing it, by the way. It's fascinating. But what was the sort of like impetus? Like, what was the thing that you're like, I'm doing this? This is going full force. We're gonna write this book. What was the call? What was the whole beginning part of this?
Yeah. So what happened was a couple of things happened. So in 2011, the Gates Foundation issued this Reinvent the Toilet Challenge, where they basically said the system that we currently use in the West are not efficient. They're extremely wasteful. We need to figure out how to recover resources. And we also need to develop new toilet systems, new sanitation systems for the developing world, because there, sewage quite often is not treated at all, and it kills, depending on what sources you read and what year, somewhere around like 800 people still get sick and die. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but those numbers are pretty impressive and shocking. So they wanted to change things. And so a bunch of scientists and engineers kind of like jumped on that bandwagon and started working on developing new and interesting systems. And I started following them because it very much resonated with my own views of the world. I was curious what they were going to do. And as I did this, I ended up writing a couple of stories on this subject. One of them was set in Madagascar. I actually got to go to Madagascar and follow a little startup on a very similar poop pickup trail as societies in China and Japan did before us. They were just doing it today in the 21st century, but in a very similar way, like manual pickup, and then they would take it to a processing facility where they would compost it and whatnot. So I wrote a couple of stories, and this one in particular, like won 2 awards, like it went viral. Everything that could republish it.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And people were like, you should write a book about it. And I'm like, maybe it's time. And so I decided to give it a shot, and here we are.
Were you somebody who was okay with poop before all this? Like, we've had other authors on the podcast, and they were like, oh, I was so grossed out to even talk about poop before. And then now I'm like the poop person. Like, how did you feel before you started diving into all these articles and then going into a book?
Nah, I was never really like that horrified of it. That I was actually always fascinated because of how I grew up. I was always fascinated with that whole circle of how beautifully it works. Like I remember, I coming home from school, I could tell that Grandpa was doing his annual sewage maintenance from like 2 miles away because you could smell. But you'd get used to the smell pretty quickly. And what's interesting, once you get used to the smell, you realize it doesn't smell any worse than the car exhaust.
Oh, I bet.
Cars malfunctioning really stink. It's kind of natural too. Like you get used to it. It doesn't really like sicken you anymore. Moreover, I remember I was little, and so he would go and open this tank that was kind of like sitting in the ground. He would open up the cover, and I wanted to see what's in it because it was such a special occasion. It was once a year. The person who could touch it was my grandpa. I mean, it was like a birthday.
Like Christmas. Once a year, you get to open up this poop package.
Actually, totally. I wanted to see it, and they would never let me near it because they were afraid I would fall in and drown.
Oh, God.
Just in general, like you wouldn't want to fall into a pit of shit. I was just so curious. And then remember when this whole science of microbiome started coming of age, probably also about 10 years ago, it started coming up. But I wrote some stories about that too, and it was even more fascinating. It wasn't just shit that's sitting in your bowels. It's a rich ecosystem with all these microbes dwelling in there, and they're all doing stuff. And without them, you'd be basically dead because you wouldn't be able to absorb your nutrients. I just think it's such a fascinating subject.
Completely.
Nice. So one article to a book. That's kind of I mean, I love it. Like I love the path you put on. Sorry.
When your grandpa was composting and he put all the sewage from the poop that you guys had made all that year, was it in with like other composting stuff and worms and whatever when he'd put it in this like 3-year long tank?
Yeah. It was a composting pit, and like all kinds of stuff went in there, like the dead plants at the end of the season, kitchen scraps that like for a few months we'd be throwing out everything from the kitchen that wasn't used into that same pit. Then you would like mix it well and cover it and let it sit. Yeah.
That's so cool.
It sounds exactly where I dropped my compost off. They have like this huge back area where it's just like different levels of the compost and how much has been breaking down. They don't do, I mean, I can't bring my shit in there, but I mean, someday maybe.
Yeah.
But, Lina, you start off your book talking about your family and how your grandpa was so forward thinking with something that's so obvious, but also like something that's not even just forward. It's something that humans have been doing for centuries. But then you go into why cities all of a sudden had to make sewer systems that weren't good. And this is probably why we are so grossed out by poo, because like even New York City was a place where the sewage would just get pumped out in the East River in the ocean. And then they realized that that's not healthy for anybody. So then they had to invent sewer systems, sewer treatment plants like the Newtown Creek that were going to be a much better solution that end up actually turning into energy and fuel, and how these digester eggs that are similar to our gut biomes in our own stomachs ends up making money for it. Costs a lot of money, but making money for the city too. Which I'm also very jealous that you've done the Newtown Creek Valentine's Day tour. I need to go on it so badly. I live half a mile from there. So, But it's interesting how your book goes from one to the other on and how poop is not just something we flush. There's so much value to it.
Yeah. So humankind kind of went through a lot of different iterations with food. So it knew in the ancient times, it was treasured as fertilizer. But people also started noticing that it can spread disease. And when the germs theory came of age in the 1900s, it was pretty clear that untreated sewage spreads disease and kills people, cholera, dysentery, like all kinds of things. So the issue with cities is that usually it means that there's a lot of people living together in a very small and crowded conditions. I mean, look at New York. A few years ago, I heard a comedian say, how much money you make in New York City tells you about how many roommates you do not have. Think about it.
Completely.
Yeah, exactly. So usually it's a lot of people in a very small space, and everybody needs to shit somewhere. And if you don't have a well-structured infrastructure for sewage disposal, that shit ends up in drinking water one way or another, either because you have a leaking latrine, or because you have a leaking sewage pipe, or because you have a sewage that isn't treated and it's being dumped into your nearest river, like the Thames, whatever. So eventually it just finds its way into drinking water. There's all this bacteria, and people start dying out. So the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century were the times when cities were building this new and different infrastructures to divert sewage from themselves, to treat sewage differently, and to prevent disease. And all of the systems did a lot of it. We are not dying from cholera. We're not getting sick with cholera. We're not getting sick with dysentery. But what the systems also did is they destroyed poo so efficiently that they kind of completely broke that normal, the natural loop where we eat, we excrete, it has to go back to growing food. Now, all these nutrients are either being destroyed because the municipalities would just burn it, or they would landfill it, which maybe slightly better than burning, but it's still sitting there kind of generating greenhouse gases rather than growing anything. And all of the effluent of the water that we extract from it, even if it's treated for pathogens, it still has the fertilizing quality. It still has the nitrogen, it still has the phosphorus. And when it flows someplace, whether it's a river or an ocean, it fertilizes all the wrong things, like the toxic algae. So toxic algae blooms, and meanwhile, we have to buy synthetic fertilizer to grow food on our farms. So that's kind of where we are with a lot of modern systems. Not all, some are better, but it's something that everybody in this industry is talking about, that we kind of have to get to the next step when we figure out how to recycle poop or upcycle poop.
Yeah.
100%.
Especially when energy can come out of it.
Yeah. So the energy-wise, there are a couple of interesting solutions. So when you compost poop, it comes to the wastewater treatment plant, you take the water out, you clean it, you release it, then you load up all that poop into biodigesters, where a bunch of microbes kind of chew through it. And in this process, they reduce the amount of food you have to deal with, but they also release methane. And if you capture that methane, that basically becomes your natural gas. Natural gas is methane. The trick there, they're telling me, is to clean it, because there's some impurities in that gas generated by bacteria. But if you do it, you can cook with it. DC Water, the wastewater treatment plant in Washington, D.C., does exactly that. They use the methane they produce to run the plant. And at the end, what comes out of their biodigesters is kind of like dried and packaged as a fertilizer called Bloom. And any gardener can buy it.
They have a similar,
awesome.
yeah, they have a similar system. I mean, a really high tech system in Amsterdam, where they say, or in the Netherlands, where they get this. They basically have broken it down to the point where they're using it for like phosphorus for like farmers. They're using it for like actually to like repave roads that's using like asphalt. That stuff is amazing to me, and I wish that we had that here. And to your point, like actually taking all these nutrients and it can be used for gas. It can be used for a salad that could be used for farming or whatever case practically. And we're also missing a golden opportunity by getting rid of it. All the things that we're not even thinking about. There's way smarter people than me, or like that I'm sure can get that job done. But it's really a shame that like, especially in this country, especially in New York City of all places too, where we're not seeing something like that happen.
Yeah, New York City is actually particularly difficult because it's a big city. It's a lot of people. God, it's a lot of shit. Just imagine that, right? How many millions of us are actually here? 8 more, and everybody shits out a pound of it a day. Like, imagine this Oregon stable, like this mounds and mounds of shit. What are you going to do with all of that? And that is actually New York's biggest challenge. I think in the book, I called that chapter or section, Overmade New York. That is really the biggest challenge. Like, where are you going to send it? There isn't enough farmland attached to this island to dump it to. So over the course of time, I'm still learning what New York does with and used to do with its shit, because they really don't like to talk about it. But like in the past, they sent it to Colorado.
Oh.
Like on a train. And the farmers in Colorado loved it.
I'm sure.
No, but yeah, they did, because it was so good that they didn't have to fertilize the land with other things. I am not sure what broke it in this like chain of events, but then they had to start sending it to Alabama. But in Alabama, that poop train stunk too much. People in Alabama didn't want it.
I think it belongs in Alabama.
It's complicated. I'm curious about that. It's like I'm hearing from people who work in this industry that a lot of farmers out there would like our New York shit very much. I think the question is how to get it there. It's got to travel on something, which means it's going to stink along the way.
Well, as you were talking about New York, I think of Newtown Creek sewage treatment plant as being like the number one, but there's many sewage treatment plants throughout the city. And you were saying that one of the oldest one is the Coney Island one, which I'm dying. Dave and I should have some kind of field trip there. And them being so old made me realize why Coney Island has such a bad reputation for being a dirty place to swim. And that's because they were dumping everything, and then they realized they can't dump all that sewage. And like, that was so interesting. Like, that's something I never knew about.
Yeah, I think, in my research, I actually did come across it, that at some point they were dumping a lot of it into the sea. But also, like in the beginning of the 20th century, I think a lot of places were just dumping it into the sea without really treating much. It's all kind of slowly developed. What was really interesting is that in England, when the Thames got so polluted by all this untreated sewage, that not only the river stunk, and people would walk an extra mile just not to cross over the bridge. It was not only it stunk, but there was so much shit floating in it that boats ran aground and got stuck in it. It
like
was
sludge.
Yeah, I know. Like, seriously. Oh, oops, the boat got stuck in shit. Now what do we do? So they had to take care of it. And the way they took care of it is they started loading all the sewage into 2 massive boats and taking it out to sea and dumping it there. Was more fish. Like, fish found these places and came to feed on shit.
Oh, wow.
Fish later. Unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's crazy.
George Carlin also has a joke. I was watching his documentary on HBO, and he was born in the 30s, and he said that he, as a kid, swam in the East River here when they were dumping sewage. And he's like, that's why I never got polio. He was like, when you can survive New York City sewage, you don't get sick. And I was like,
Pretty much.
Yeah, that actually is pretty impressive.
But he was like a kid in the 40s. They didn't know better. So they were like, yeah, let the kids swim in the East River with the poo. It's fine. Ugh, so gross.
That's pretty disgusting. I mean, you could try that now if you just go swimming a day after a giant rainstorm at the beach.
Yeah.
If you want to try that, you can get kind of the
See if
same
you
experience.
Get vaccinated for stuff that way instead of real vaccinations.
You find all kinds of gross shit a day after a rainstorm.
Lina, I also love how your book talks about how important poop is, not just for energy and composting, but also, and we've had other guests on this show talking about fecal transplants. And it was almost like your book was two books in one, because you went into that direction. I was like, oh yeah, like there's so many health issues that we are just either throwing antibiotics at, or as you even pointed out, some people get parts of their colon removed. And it's interesting that fecal transplant is still something so new, but it's working to help all these people with autoimmune problems.
Yeah, well, you're right. There's a little bit of you can say it's like the two books at one, but for me, the unifying substance was, of course, and I was just trying to show all of its potential, and the fact to what extent it is actually defines us, if you think about it. Like, our health is basically written in that poo language, in that masses that are passing through our intestines. So that was the second story that led to the book, in which I wrote about this lady who was suffering from Clostridium difficile, which is a very difficult bug to treat, and it can turn into a superbug when it stops responding to antibiotics. I think she did it. It was like 2012.
So you wrote this article about a woman, and it's the abbreviation was C. diff.
Yeah, C. diff.
Yeah, and it's this super bug that happens, especially when people have been sick from other things and they have to take too many antibiotics, and then they just start internally almost bleeding and pooping all the time because their gut biome just can't heal itself. And then this woman basically cured herself by doing a fecal transplant.
Yeah, and that was when fecal transplants were still unheard of, and nobody knew about them, and she didn't know about them. She was so at the end of her rope, but they were just Googling things on the internet. They found some information about fecal transplants, but all the doctors that could do in the entire country, she couldn't travel to, they were too far away. So she just resolved to do it on her own with her husband, and her husband was the donor. And the way they did it was he took a dump into the kind of like this sterile container, shit out of there. He put it in the blender. He mixed it up with an enema liquid and pushed the button and made that milkshake. I still remember writing this story. I wrote that paragraph like very graphically, intending to like gross people out. I'm completely fascinated. And my editor at the time said that it was the most fascinating paragraph he ever read in his whole life.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Mission accomplished.
It is fascinating, the whole fecal implant thing, because we have guests on there that have done the same thing, and just the preparation, like the care that goes into it, and then just getting down to the nitty gritty as far as like inserting it was just like a whole thing. That process to DIY is like pretty incredible, but it works.
It works. Like, that's the thing. It works like amazingly. It took her less than 24 hours after like months and months of like not functioning. 24 hours later, she was completely and totally. She put on makeup, left the house, and drove a car.
Wow.
It is just like
after being like stuck at home and every 2 hours running to the bathroom, she said, yeah. It's intense.
Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah, we had a woman on who had intestinal failure. And she tried everything and even was eating out of her heart for over 4 months. And then finally she found somebody to help her be a donor, and the fecal transplant, after 2 tries, she's so much healthier now.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, like it's so funny how something so simple like poop could help so many people.
Yeah.
We should also preface saying we're not doctors, so we're not telling you to go do this shit on your own. So if you want to do it, that's great. I think there's lots of awesome benefits from it, but at your own risk, as they say, if you're going to be doing a DIY,
and find the right ones.
Get some doctor friends or talk to the people that are in the book. If you can,
Yes.
get a hold of them, see how they did
Yes.
it, etc., etc., etc.
Yes.
Yeah,
Do
those-
not get medical advice from a podcast, especially this one.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the second story that led to books. So between these two stories, I decided to write a book proposal. I'm very grateful to my agent who had the right attitude for the whole thing, and she said, "Okay, let's give it a shot."
Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean, I feel like we're going through a big poop renaissance right now maybe because we're so in it, Dave and I, with this show for the past 3.5 years, but it seems like a lot of people are opening their eyes or their brown eye up to the idea that poop is actually part of life and maybe it could be valuable.
I know.
Well, I think too, it's like even with the internet is helpful for getting information out with that kind of stuff. So I think the fact that books like yours, other books, authors we've had on, stories that you find out. The New York Post has a whole poop section now. I mean, I don't think that would have been a thing like even a year ago, maybe, or 2 years ago. But to me, most of them are like tongue in cheek. Some of them do lead to kind of other interesting stories or like articles we found, which brought us guests to this show. So it's kind of like a weird, like poop. It is a poop renaissance in the sense where people are talking about it more. There's not as taboo. I mean, it's still very taboo, but in a lot of people's minds. But I think things have softened, and especially on the technology side, because that's always any kind of dollar thing, like anything we could save or make money. I think that's becoming a thing, especially like in agriculture around the world, because we're running out of a lot of resources, and if we can use our poop and pee, that's always a plus.
Which, talking about dollars, the whole time I was reading your book, I love the title, The Other Dark Matter, but I was also thinking of the title, how oil is black gold. We need to be starting to call poop brown gold. Like, we need to realize that if people understand that monetizing or saving money or heating with, well, I mean, like, I think fracking is the most messed up thing that we've been doing to our environment. And if we can replace methane that we get from our own shit, replace fracking with that, like, how brilliant. So we need to almost, like, during this poop renaissance, redo this with the PR and calling it brown gold. Let's figure out ways that we all can make money and make our lives better through poop.
Oh, I totally agree. I always say poop has an image problem. Somebody's got to do an awesome PR
Yeah.
for poop.
Just talk to your agents.
Yeah, your next book should be Brown Gold, the next frontier.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck black
I mean, it's
gold.
definitely
We're all
happening.
about brown gold.
I saw an Instagram feed sponsored ad for a urine collection, as far as like for like agriculture. And we've talked about it in the show too, but it's like even that was like I was shocked to see like an ad for that, and like, they went through the whole process. Like I know it was like a sizzle reel, but still, you would never see that. I feel like 2-3 years ago. So I think there's it's on the horizon. All the things that are going around with people like that are trying to smart and innovative ways to harness this stuff.
Yeah, Lina, talking about that, what can we and our audience do? Like, is there, it seems like they're starting to realize that if you have a healthy gut, maybe you should be sending your poop into places to maybe send it to people who need it for fecal transplants. Or is there, as Dave is saying with this ad about urine, or do you have a resources or an idea for our audience and what they can do to take their poop to the next level?
Take the poop to the next level. Yeah, I can have a couple of ideas. So if you're really an incredibly healthy person and you think that your poop can save lives, I'm not kidding, then there is a place where you can donate it, but you have to be living kind of closely to it because you can't ship it. It's not that the post office won't take it. No, it's that it has to be really seriously tested for all kinds of pathogens. So the place is Open Biome, and it's in Boston. And they are actively looking for donors because apparently, as they told me, it is easier to get into MIT or Harvard than be qualified to donate poo. Like that.
Wow.
How awesome! You have like every your blood test, urine test, and all other tests have to be completely normal and not even like fluctuate like 1 or 2 days out of a month something is wrong, because then they're not sure.
I'm sorry, did you say biome or Viome?
Biome, yeah. Open Biome. They're near Boston. They take donations. They screen them for pathogens and other health issues. They turn them into two types of, I guess you can say, medium. One that that is administered via the rear end, and another one they put them in capsules. And I actually watched this little machine like put up little drops of like liquefied poo into little capsules and close it so people can take it by mouth. So that is one way to take your poop to the next level and save somebody's life with it. The other, maybe more conventional way of taking it to the next level is figuring out if you can recycle it. It's not an easy thing to do. It can only work in certain situations. So if you're living in the off-the-grid community, and you're really sick of your stinky latrine, or if you're living in campsites, there are ways to build composting toilets. The super easy ones is just you dig a hole and you put a bucket in the hole, and every time you go into the bucket, you put in a bunch of wood chips or something like this to cover it. It's actually amazing because I've used this type of toilets, and there are no flies, because there's no smell, the flies don't come. They're reasonably comfortable. And then once the bucket fills up, you just add it to the compost pile and you cover it up and continue. So there are campsites that are actually doing it, pretty successfully. And all of the communities can do that too. Now, there's a slightly more advanced version of that where there's less of manual labor, but for that you have to spend a few bucks. I'm not sure how much these days. You can buy a system from a place called Home Biogas. They are in Israel, and they build two types of systems. One for composting just like food leftovers, and another one that you can attach to a toilet, to a bio toilet that doesn't flush the water, but just flushes a little bit.
Right.
And with composting toilets, we've had people on before. It's just poo. You have to pee separately, or like you have to have one that separates the pee from the poo.
Yes and no. They're very basic ones you don't have to separate.
Okay, cool.
If you separate them, then you can do more with these two different types of inputs.
Right.
You can't convert them into other things. If you just combine them, it just goes into a compost pit, eventually becomes soil. Nothing fancy.
Like that's what your grandpa did. It was poo and pee.
Yeah, everything was together.
Yeah.
So it's Home Biogas, and they build this new types of systems that can be connected to a toilet. And what happens in them, they calling them tanks would be wrong because not really tanks. They made of PVC, like hard type of, not really hard. It's durable plastic. So everything happens on the inside. Basically, the same type of composting is going on the inside because you're sort of seeded with microbes, and microbes keep on going. And they generate biogas, which you can cook on. Watch the whole process. It works. Boils water and whatnot. And from the other end comes out kind of this liquidly fertilizer that you can use on your garden.
Cool.
I'm on the site now, and it looks awesome.
Oh, you found that Home Biogas? Isn't that awesome?
I mean, it's pretty sweet. For 3 people, obviously we have to do some more research on this, but like just quickly, like they have a little shop up to 3 people. So it's imagine a 3-person household. It's like only $1,300.
Oh.
And it's got all these things, components. I don't know what the hell they are, but it's got a picture of a toilet, and then they're it looks like a weird like pop-up tent, like almost like a kid's tent. But it's fascinating. I mean, it says 1 hour of free cooking gas. Off a single stove. Like that's kind of crazy. Human and food waste. So
wow.
This is really fascinating.
So smart.
Yeah.
We should have them on the show.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously we got Open Biome and Home Biogas.
Yeah.
So thanks, Lina, for those two. You could possibly get one of those people on the show.
Yeah.
Talk about their technology. But it's fascinating. I want one now. This is fucking amazing. If you get the 6-person, I'm sorry, I'm totally digressing here, but it's a very cool looking product. For sure.
A friend of mine went to Cuba a couple of years ago, and she went to a farm where like the farmer did something to all of the poop and pee that came from the animals and the humans, and he transformed it into gas that he heated his home and the gas stove and all the rest of it. And I was like, that just seems like a better system, where it just seems like when you're self-containing everything, you're taking your poo and turning it into gas. We're cutting out all the middleman. It's just smarter.
Yeah.
like kind of side note to or addendum to this home biogas, there's like these things called earth ships. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's like this style of architecture that's guy developed out in the desert in the US here. And it's fascinating because in the house, the whole thing is it's like a built-in greenhouse.
Oh,
so the
cool.
front of the house that's where the sunlight and everything comes in. There's a back berm that collects the cold air that acts as like a sort of like DIY air conditioning. Anyway, all the water that's collected and everything through this house gets sent back through your little sort of greenhouse, which acts as like your own personal indoor garden. So you kind of like reusing all the water that you're recycling throughout the day. Toilet water turns into gray water. But this home biogas, to add it to that would be like incredible. You'd be completely... I mean, those houses are already off the grid, but this would be like a whole nother level in the sense of using everything in that house to cook, to clean with, whatever you need to do. And
To heat.
I mean, those things are like basically self-heating. They're completely set up where they don't even need to be connected to any kind of electrical grid, which is kind of amazing. So, but this would be insane, like to add to that. So just a little thing I want to talk about there real quick. Nerding out.
Yeah.
Lina, do you have anything else that you want to bring to us about your book? Can we ask you some of our regular questions, or can we go into our game?
Sure. Let's do the game.
Okay.
Well, actually, maybe we should ask, since we're keeping research or data, I should say, we should ask her at least the over/under question.
Yes, our favorite question to ask all of our guests is, what kind of toilet paper do you use, and do you put it on the roll over or under?
Over. I don't know why, but I think it's just aesthetically more pleasing.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
looks like a waterfall.
Yes.
Okay.
What type of toilet paper? To be honest, I'm really not that picky. I usually go for the one that gives me the biggest amount of paper on the buck, like last longer, in a sense that I feel like some of the really nice and fluffy ones, not particularly economical. Like, there's a lot of wasted paper. I feel really sorry about that.
Yes.
So,
You're preaching to the choir in this show.
Yeah.
I'm kind of an easy-going gal when it comes to toilet paper.
Cool. All right. We'll add it to the number chart. We'll let everybody know when this. We have 100. We have a lot of episodes. So, but I would easily say that most people are over as far as the waterfall technique. But
That interesting. Somebody should do a study. Why so?
oh, there has been.
There has been. We did it on our second episode
Yeah.
ever.
There
We
was
read
a
all about that.
complete study based on this. So, and it's kind of over. I mean, it's mainly everybody in the world across the board is over. But okay, so look, we're gonna get into a little game that we like to call Shitty Choices. And today, would you rather shit your pants every single day? You don't know when it's coming, but it just happens every day. You're gonna poop your pants. Or would you rather be in a coma for 3 years straight?
Ooh, lordy.
Both horrible.
No, I'd rather be in a coma, but not because one is more horrible than the other.
You want to take a little nap? Little nappy nap?
Yeah, because people in the coma can experience things people in a regular everyday life can't. I mean, this is a sad story, but a friend of mine, her husband went into a coma, and while he was in a coma, it was clear that he could hear her and his children because
Wow.
he reacted to their voices. And she even asked him, "If you hear me, can you squeeze my hand?" And he would do that.
Wow.
Unfortunately, he died.
Aw.
And not from a coma. He had infections developing in his body, and it was the story itself is really sad. But what was clear is that he was in a coma, but his brain was functioning. So if I would know for sure that I would come back from the coma, I would choose the coma because it's sort of like an out of body experience. And shitting my pants are nothing new in that.
Ellen?
I agree completely with Lina. I would pick coma because I am already lacking sleep. So 3 years of sleep sounds great. And as long as I knew I was waking up after that 3 years, I'd be like, cool, see you guys in 3 years. The only thing that would suck with the coma is waking up and your muscles atrophy and that kind of stuff would not be fun. But it seems so much better than shitting my pants every day.
Oh, yeah. No, I went with comas as well. Same reasons. I mean, I would like to be hooked up to some kind of machine that just works out my body while I'm in a coma. So they can hook that up. That would be great, too. So I'm not like completely just like
atrophied.
soft like
Yeah.
just mound. But yes, so we're gonna go all across the board for coma. So
Yes.
I thought the same thing. So perfect.
Anonymous.
Yes, she's unanimous. Okay, so we're gonna do a little news story and then we'll get you out of here.
Yes.
So here we go. Okay. So this story actually was brought to us by Evan Madden from the great Portland Lou, last week's interviewee. This was basically, this is kind of, it's so criminal. So after a decade of their debut, 15 public toilets are still sitting in a warehouse in Queens.
Ay. I've told a couple people about this.
Yeah. So this was
One friend of ours who works for the New York City's Parks Department, he goes, yeah, that sounds like New York.
Yeah. So this was initially published in 2018, and apparently these things are still sitting there. So basically, New York in 2008 unveiled these like 20 self-cleaning public toilets. 2008, by the way. It's 2022 now. So 2008, everybody was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is going to be incredible. This is what we need, especially for the homeless, people that's on the street, anybody, any citizen that can use a bathroom. But like most things in New York, apparently only 5 of these things got used, and the other 15 remaining are just literally sitting in a warehouse. City officials basically say that they didn't really expect. Apparently, it takes like $40,000 a year to run these things. Some places they did, again, and Evan mentioned this in the episode, which if you listen to it, you'll hear about it, that there's no site, there's no like sort of like pre-production for this thing. Like, so a lot of places that they were necessarily going to put them in, they didn't have access to electricity or water, and moving all that stuff was going to cost more than the actual toilet. I believe each one cost $500,000,
Oh, God.
roughly. Something crazy like that. So basically, there's one in Madison Square Park. This is this is from 2018. I'd like to think that they fixed it since, but probably not, knowing this city. The toilet.
Well, I drove past that one that I made a reel of that had fucking porta potty right next to it.
Yeah, this one. This is from, again, this is like what, like a million years ago and 6 years ago. And this thing is still, I mean, basically there's like a giant bucket with just piss and shit in it. And people were just living next to it. Like the door's locked. They couldn't actually get into it. So they're making like makeshift toilets next to the actual public toilet. And then in this article from 2018 again, 4 years ago. I can't do math right now. Anyway, they basically had said that the DOT had been alerted the company that was supposed to be in charge of this thing. So back in 2008, this thing had been broken for so long. The company that installed this thing that's in charge of maintaining it didn't even know it was broken. Until they had this giant, I think a representative from Queens came out here and was basically like, this is like unacceptable.
Yes.
But again, I'm not excusing 20 or whatever, all these toilets being in a warehouse, but it's just like this idea. I think politicians get into this idea. Look, I'm helping, I'm doing something, but there's no like actual
follow through.
Like, there's no, not just follow through, but it's like do a little bit of research. Some of these things, like it's like you got to put this really expensive thing into New York City, and then you realize, oh wait, we can't plug this into the infrastructure because it's going to cost like more than the actual toilet, and now they're sitting there.
They ordered 20 of them, installed 6, so it means 14 of them are sitting in a warehouse.
5. This is, the article says 15 public toilets are still said. They used 5 of them out of the 20. So 5 are somewhere outside of the city, somewhere.
So 15 of them are in the warehouse.
Yeah.
So that's about $7.5 million just sitting there.
Completely. And I'm sure they're. I mean, again, this is like the technology is probably so old now that even if they did break them out, it's just going to be pointless. So yeah, very expensive. I don't know. It doesn't tell you what part of Queens. It says Queens as a whole, so who knows? My guess is they probably threw them out and just keep saying that. Probably. I did something with them. So I just thought there was a fascinating article we heard about last week, and now I'm reading or giving it to you people right now. So yes, it's really depressing, and I'd like to think that we can get our shit together. No pun intended. And really fully focus on working on this public toilet issue because it is an issue that needs to be addressed in this city especially.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So with that story, Lina, thank you so much for being on our show. You're fantastic. Thanks for writing that amazing book, The Other Dark Matter. Go out and buy it, listen to it, whatever how you absorb material. go do it. And if you can please tell our audience where they can find you, where they can find out more about the book, etc., just plug away.
Sure. So the book is available anywhere where books are sold. That includes Barnes & Nobles, Amazon,
Audible.
Goodreads, Audible. Yeah. You can find me by just Googling my name, Lina Zeldovich. I have a website that's not super fancy, but you can find me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. There's even an Instagram where I'm there in a funny poop hat. It's really wrong. I should really use Instagram a lot. It's like a perfectly poopy place.
Yeah.
We know. We do know.
Yeah. So yeah, you can find me anywhere. I've been having a lot of success lately speaking at different events, believe it or not, about poop and what to do with it at conferences, at even some of New York nonprofits who are interested in recycling. I would actually love to start talking to schools. So if you need some funky topic that audience is going to love, I am the poop face of the planet. And every time I talk about it, people are completely fascinated. Actually, I have had 2 different artists made me 2 different poop capes or poop mantles, whatever you want to call them. So kind of wear this whole getup with that and a hat. It just people think it's fascinating because how many normal, quote unquote, normal people would actually do that? But everybody.
Well, Lina, I just want to say you are normal because you poop.
Yes, we all poop.
Yep. The great equalizer.
I am.
We all poop.
Well, thank you again. Congratulations on all your success with the book. And to the audience out there, thanks for laughing and learning everything but with us.
And happy pooping, everybody, and enjoy your butthole.
For more info, go to heypoopypodcast.com or email us at heypoopypodcast@gmail.com. You can send in show ideas, guest requests. Check us out on Twitter at heypoopy, Instagram at heypoopypodcast, TikTok, heypoopypodcast, and our awesome new Facebook fan page. Go check it out at heypoopypodcast. We're also on Discord at heypoopydumps, or you can contact us at our new awesome hotline, 203-998-5579.
Hey Poopy Podcast is brought to you by Perfect for Entertainment. Produced by Dave and Ellen. Edited by Dave. Executive producer Stormy Leather. Theme song by Jordan Perlson. Hey Poopy!